Howdy, folks. Today we're going to talk about the Intuara balance. IEM, this is a one dynamic driver, as you can see right here. Resin 3D printed IEM. Sorry about the fingerprints, I've already been touching it a bunch. I really appreciate the sort of the build and the ergonomics of this. It fits really well in my ear. I don't like the back plate at all. Actually, I hate it. It triggers me in some way. So we have the IN in Intuara. But Luna, what does this mean? No idea. Random. All right, so we can see that we have the one dynamic driver. We have a 3D printed shell. And you can see the 3D print marks in here. Really, really cool. Just on a side note, I have a 3D printer, and so when I see this kind of stuff, the very sharp layering in this, that means to me that it's a very high quality printer. You'd expect nothing less from a company that probably does IEMs a lot. So anyway, doesn't have the traditional like pinhole front vent. It has a bypass tube, so that goes around the dynamic driver through the resin. Then there's a gap right here in the back plate, and that goes all the way over to yonder, over to here. And then we can see that it has this gigantic tube that comes out with the nice little mesh vent. And that's a really nice way to do it. It looks cool. You don't have a gaping hole in the back. Arguably water and stuff, if it's raining, won't get right into it. So that's a cool design. I like that. But yeah, so that's the general design of this 10 millimeter dynamic driver. And it is 220 freedom dollars. And so it's in the range of like the Oxygen, the Tangentium Oxygen, and other like medium high-end drivers. Yeah, so let's continue on. We'll flip over to the desktop. I have a different setup these days. Sorry, I got to shift around, but I've got like a workbench and then I've got my computer bench, and they're separate. So anyway, all right. So Intuara balance, $220, 10 millimeter dynamic driver, DLC. So that's diamond-like carbon. That's a coating on top of a like plastic. It's hard to say what kind of plastic, but diaphragm. And then peak, I think, means that it's got a sort of different material that's much less stiff for the surround on the dynamic driver. Then, 3D printed resin, very, very high quality, 18 ohm, meaning that you can run it off of any device about, it's like the rule of impedance, about 10 less, so 1.8 ohms for your device. So most devices out there are going to be just well under 1 ohm, and that'll be great. So yeah, talking about the fit and the finish, the fit is actually really, really nice on them. I can't imagine how people have problems. It has a rather skinny nozzle. Back plate I hate. But the resin and the clear mojo of it I love a lot, and they did a really good job, and the finishing of it's very smooth and very nice. So the tuning overall we'll call balanced, which is not entirely, I don't think, what other people mean by balanced, but it just means to me that the tuning here, like the sub bass, the mid bass, the mids, the treble overall is all sort of at the same like sound pressure level, so it's all kind of flattish sounding in that aspect. Everything's sort of at the same level, right? Graphs don't show that because you have to consider that the ear compensation flattens this out somewhat. But anyway, that's just kind of how I hear it. It's certainly not Harman. It has much more mid bass and quite a lot more, as you can see, treble, or I should say less treble, more mid bass. And but other than that, it's actually fairly similar in the uppers, although maybe a little bit higher even than Harman. So it is a little bit shimmery and twinkly in the uppers. So anyways, just giving some ratings. The bass on this, I find the driver to be actually quite good. Just a small thuddy quality, but again, like the Twilight has that same small thuddy quality. I think that's just due to the mid-bass quantity. Also, Volume S, for instance, has, I think, a little bit of that going on. But that is your mid-bass. And mid-bass and subs about the same, ish volume on them. So it feels full. Bass especially feels very nice, full, fleshed out, and also the low mids as well, continuing on with that. But super good. So we'll call it an 8.5 out of 10 in bass, which is really quite good, I think, for the price. Mids, we're going to give an 8.5 out of 10. So they're quite nice. The timbre on them is actually pretty good. It's a bit forward, actually. So generally compared to tracks on speakers, right? So vocals and instruments may pop out a little bit, sort of into the center of your attention more than on just your standard set of speakers. But overall, good timbre with them, and I like them better than like your average Knowles balanced armatures for mids, just to say that. Treble, we're going to give a 7.5 out of 10. Good. And this is kind of a stickler point with this. I think it's hard to say exactly where, but I think the treble's a little bit high overall. Maybe even in the high mids, perhaps a little bit, but it just comes across just a little bit splashier, shall we say, than I would like. It's just hard to define this, but I just think that the treble is just it could be better if it was a little bit less and more in one area and another. We'll just say that. Also, just to mention this, the 8K peak, when you see this on a coupler, it's a little bit interesting because you can kind of, and this isn't always the case, but it is in a lot of cases, you can actually determine the damping factor by the slope before the 8K peak, how high the 8K peak is, and then on the other end of it. So in this case, I'd say the damping factor is a little bit higher than I would prefer on the driver. So that means basically it cuts out a little bit of your like 6.5K area, 7K, and then the resonance factor of the coupler and everything else right here will hit at 8K hard. But it seems like you can tell that it hits harder at the 8K peak. In other words, if the damping factor, the like whatever they're using on the driver, is higher than, I think it's like the balance is a higher dampening than the low, right? So the driver is really pushing against air on both sides of itself, rather than floating freely in space. That's kind of how I think about that. So this has probably a medium-high dampening factor. Just to say that. Anyway, ultra treble, we're going to give an 8.5, or sorry, 8 out of 10. And like basically where that comes from is there's not a bunch of huge peaks in here. They're smaller peaks. So the resonance in the ear canal is going to be less for some reason, maybe just the shape in the nozzle, something like that. And so those peaks are small. And also it goes all the way out to, what are we at here? Like 16K. And that is, if the mids are at, let's just say 60, then we're down like 5 or something decibels from the mids all the way out to 16K. So that's actually a lot of energy above 10K, and really quite good for a dynamic driver overall. So really good, 8 out of 10. Stage wideness. Okay, so we're going to move on to the staging factors. Wideness on this is actually really pretty good. It's 8.5 to 9 out of 10, depending on how you sort of think about that. But it's really actually very, very good, and it's near the top, I think, what can be found on any IEM out there. People may find that, I don't know, more treble, say more shimmery treble does more of that for them, but I'm just talking about what I think about like in the 3D positioning of the sounds. So the wideness on this is very, very good. Depth, we're going to give a 7 out of 10, and mostly that's because we got some forward mids that sort of break that depth perception factor a little bit. But basically then you get some more full fleshed out sort of in your face mids with this styled tuning. But 3D and swirly though on this is like really, really good. 8.5 to 9 out of 10. So really amazing. Not quite as good as, let's say, probably Twilight, I think is better. Dark Magician, I would say probably a little better. I just think actually those drivers are slightly higher quality drivers overall. But this does a damn good job at its price point, and it's more like 3D than, say, the Oxygen, for instance. And I would say, yeah, it's probably a little wider as well. So anyways, really, really good. Volume scaling, 8 out of 10. So yeah, we're going to be limited by a little bit of treble going on there. And actually, I didn't actually write this, but the forward mids can be a little bit much at higher volume levels. And so when I say forward mids, what I actually mean is, we're talking about, let's say, between 700 to 800 hertz all the way up to about 1K, or let's say 1.5K. Sorry, 1.5K is right here. So the overall, uh, the shape of this shelf right here, sort of the incline right here, matters a tremendous amount, and it's really hard to see this on graphs unless you compensate. But in any ways, what I hear is basically this is a little bit forward. So if it was like a couple decibels less right between 800 and say 1.5K, it would be a lot more deep sounding and a little more forgiving, and also that. But there's a lot of 3D elements in the sound that are exist in that area. So if you dip them out, you just don't hear them as clearly. So I don't know. It's a give and take. It's very hard to do this right. Anyway, a little forward in this area. Volume scaling. It actually is a little limited in terms of volume scaling in that area. All right, so music replay. And by the way, I'm talking about this because I like this set a lot, as if you can't tell. All right, so blues, excellent. John Mayer, absolutely fantastic. Feeling Bad Blues by Ry Cooder, totally amazing. Loved it a lot. Classical, decent. It's got a little too much mid bass, I think, for classical. You get sort of a little bit of a haziness sort of to the background. It's not bad. The 3D stage is actually really, really good, but I think overall, probably people that listen to a lot of classical are probably going to want to look somewhere else. This is more for, like I said, Western music, with lots of mid bass, lots of sub bass, and just because the music gets filled out better in those senses with this type of tuning. And then leading on to disco, excellent. Not too much mids, good mid bass, treble just right, like really, really excellent if you're into disco stuff. It's just more like that genre of music, from I guess the mid 70s to the early 80s, something like that. Electronica, excellent to actually not great, and that was limited by the treble. So we're talking about above the high mids all the way into this area here. I just found that it was a little bit more than I could deal with on some tracks at a decent volume. Let's see, Cascade in particular, some of those, like maybe half the tracks, were just a little too much for me to deal with at the volume I wanted to put them at, and the other ones were like pretty good. So yeah, it's a thing, man. Because a lot of EDM has just a lot of treble in it, and so this is right on the edge of what I consider to be okay for that. I would say you wouldn't want to buy it for EDM necessarily, but if it's like something in your library that you enjoy, it'll probably do okay. Jazz, absolutely excellent. Mid bass, just perfect, man. So nice. Herbie Hancock, Headhunters, the album, so nice on this. Just that nice bouncy, thumpy sort of jazzy mojo going on. Really nice. Metal was actually excellent. Mid bass, we got plenty of that. This shelf right here, it's not thinned out. You don't have this sucked out mids there. So I found it to be just absolutely fantastic for metal. Yeah. Same for rock, essentially. Really, really good. Occasionally, if like a track has really high mix cymbals, they come across the list a little extra than I want, but nothing to complain about. So excellent. R&B, excellent. Fantastic subs. Great bass overall, nice filled out. Twinkly upper treble, and slightly forward mids, I think, do really rather good for R&B. You get some really good vocals, especially female vocals. Soundtrack's absolutely excellent. The stage, the 3D swirliness on this was super good. Excellent, epic feeling on soundtracks. Vaporwave was off the charts, man, just because of the 3D swirly stage. So, like, if the X factor was anything on this, it'd be the fact that we do actually have mid bass. It's not too much. It's not too bloated. And we have that 3D swirly stage going on, like really high-end stuff. So that's got to be it for this. And, really nice fleshed out mids as well. Vintage and Lounge was absolutely excellent. Like I said, mid bass, full, nice, big sound, great stage. Everything was just very nice. So, in conclusion, I like this set a lot. Works for most of my library. The fit is actually really good. Love the resin, the clearness of it. You can see everything. I hate the back plate. Slightly forward mids. They're a little forwarder than I would forward. I would reel them back just a hair if it were me. But it's so hard to do that. I swear, like that's, I'm making my own set, right? And it's one of the hardest things to get right is the slight forwardness of mids, but not too much to be shouty. And I think the shout range is definitely between like 800 and say 2K. That range in there, if that slopes up too fast, then you're gonna get like, it's the high mids area, I would say, but it gets shouty. So anyway, the driver on this is pretty good, but not the best driver ever. I think they just happened to tune it really, really well. Whoever the tuner is, he's got a good ear for this kind of stuff. And it is legit, like totally legit for Western music. I think this is an easy to love IEM, 100%. I would say it's a little hard to get. I found some on eBay. Not sure if Linsol's selling them, but for a while they were hard to get. So I don't know, maybe could be a thing. It's not going to beat anything like a super high-end dynamic driver, but it's like a taste of them and a really good one. The difference between, I don't know, like a Twilight or a Dark Magician in this would be like, I was thinking about it a little. I'll just say like maybe 20%, right? It's that last little bit, that last bit of refinement that I think the driver maybe lacks. I don't think the tuning lacks it necessarily, but they had to do what they had to do because the driver is the way it is. Anyways, just a step behind those kind of IEMs, but definitely recommended for 220 bucks. Yeah, man, it's a pretty IEM. It is well made, backplate, bleh. And I feel like if you're into Western types of music, then you're going to totally dig the Intuara balance. Right on. Talk to you on the next one.